So in between tutorials, I want to make some smaller, quicker to make videos that talk about animation from all sorts of backgrounds, because I want to make it easier to understand not only how animation is made, but also show the artist behind it and the amount of work that goes into it. And with Wendell and Wild releasing on Netflix, I figured I could talk about the films that came before it, and the director behind them, Henry Selick. Even though it's been 13 years since Coraline, people still talk about it, and I think there's a good reason as to why that is, but first we need to start at the beginning. Depending on who you are, you may or may not know Selick for The Nightmare Before Christmas, maybe without knowing it. I'm not sure if this is still a misconception floating around, but Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas wasn't directed by Tim Burton. He was still heavily involved, and he came up with the initial concepts, but he was too busy with Batman Returns to direct, and he approached Selick to direct instead. After that, he was pretty much hands-off with the actual production of the film, so it's Burton's ideas and characters, but everything you see in the actual film is Selick and his team. What always blows my mind about The Nightmare Before Christmas is that at that time, everything was done on film. For stop motion, that means shooting every frame one by one and then waiting for that footage to develop. Today, there are tools such as drag and frame that allow stop motion animators to view their shot in real time, but back then it was kind of a guessing game. You shoot your film, you get it developed, no takebacks. You see an error, you redo that shot from the beginning. They did have a monitor in which they could see the last 2 frames they shot and compare them to what they're about to shoot, but otherwise it was pretty raw compared to 2D animation. Animators would go through a whole scene shooting only a few frames, called a pop-through, in order to see how far a character needs to walk, what problems they might run into, how to stage characters in the shot and lighting, all that jazz. And on the first frame they shot, they would actually draw an outline around the character, and as the scene progresses and they continue to animate, that outline shows them how far the character has walked. Once they were ready to animate the scene for real, they moved on to the hero shot that hopefully ends up in the final film. But along the way, any of those tests or the final hero shot, you take a frame and that was it. You can maybe edit the film afterwards by literally cutting it up, but otherwise you gotta start from the beginning all over again. This makes certain scenes like the opening pretty nuts when you think about it, considering just how much is moving on screen at once. When you animate in 3D, the computer is keeping track of every frame individually per character, but in stop motion, everything has to be animated all at once every frame. So if you place yourself in that studio at that time, just imagine trying to keep track of all the characters in this shot. I'm sure they had animators assigned to individual characters in a scene, but still, it's pretty tough work. However, at least one thing in animation was controlled by computers, which is the camera. A crane is programmed to fluidly move from one position to the next, and an operator moves that camera one frame at a time towards that next destination. So animators could make their adjustments to the current frame and then tell the camera operator to shoot the current frame and move on to the next. That's how you get these camera movements that feel almost handheld and cinematic. But between every frame, the animators are moving every puppet individually. I think this mix of digital camera work with traditional stop motion really elevates the animation and makes it feel lifelike, kind of like it's moving on its own. After The Nightmare Before Christmas came James and the Giant Peach, which I feel doesn't get talked about as much as other stop-motion animated films, but it's still pretty delightful. The character designs of these main bug characters are really fun, and I think the movie as a whole is a great example of how creative you can get with animation in terms of things that you can only do in animation. I think when compared to The Nightmare Before Christmas, which mostly resembles Burton's artwork, this is when we start to see more of Selick's art direction. I feel like this sense of character design is also seen in Wendell and Wild, in particular these very hard-edged, sort of wonky looking characters. This is also the first film that starts to mix in digital effects with blue screen shots for the ocean, and these birds have this very outdated but very charming CGI when they're seen from far away. There's also an excellent sense of color and lighting in this film, especially in this underwater scene. Stop motion in general is a really excellent place to play with lighting because you can use lighting techniques that are usually exclusive to live action, such as gel lighting, where you place a colored gel in front of your set's lights to give off specific atmospheres. Much of the mood and atmosphere in live action is determined by gel lighting, so whenever I see that used in stop motion, it really brings a smile to my face because it fully utilizes the medium in ways that 2D and even 3D CG can't. What most people remember about James and the Giant Peach, though, is the mix between live action and stop motion. And if we're going to start talking about mixing live action and stop motion, we should just talk about Selick's next film, Monkeybone. Okay, Monkeybone is a lot. I'm not going to summarize the plot, I'm not reviewing the film, I'm just looking at its art and animation. Just know that it was a huge box office bomb and everyone considered it a narrative disaster. But I think it's visually a very vibrant and creative film. There's this sort of dreamlike world Brendan Fraser ends up in called Downtown, and any scene that takes place there is actually pretty great. The set design, costumes, all of it creates this really weird, surreal, dreamlike setting that I think fits the delirious, confused state that the character's in. And all of it features the usual excellent stop motion that Selick was known for at this point. But about halfway through the film, it all sort of falls apart. It has its moments, but the rest of the film takes place almost entirely within the real world rather than downtown, and it's all just kind of a disaster. Hey look, it's Bob Odenkirk. And I think part of the reason why that is because Henry Selick was allegedly fired halfway through production. Yeah, I found this out after basically writing this entire script, and it explains everything. So let's back up a bit. What's important to know here is that Monkeybone is actually based on a comic called Darktown, and Downtown, the movie setting, shares a lot more in common with that comic than the rest of the film. And this wasn't a well-known comic at all at the time. It only ever had one issue and a small print run, but Selick loved the original comic so much that when he pursued the film rights, he's quoted as saying, "I've never felt any project was closer to my sensibilities than this one." And you know what? That makes a lot of sense. If you look at Wenzel and Wild and even parts of Coraline and James and the Giant Peach, it really does feel like it shares a visual DNA with Darktown. And I think the sensibilities that he's talking about really come out during these scenes in Downtown, the movie setting. It makes me wonder if Selick wanted to adapt Darktown into a fully stop motion film, because I think the Darktown comic would really lend itself visually to stop motion. Something about the comic's art style feels like you could do the whole film in sort of a woodcut style with dark mood lighting and a spooky atmosphere, just like Selick's other films. At the time, stop motion was a hard sell to executives because it was seen as dated compared to CG, and he was likely only able to make the film if it was entirely live action but with some stop motion characters. And it's a shame because I can really see a stop motion adaptation of Darktown looking really beautiful. The stop motion we did get out of Monkeybone, though, is really wonderful. It's incredibly fluid, it's clean, characters often interact with actors in a way that still holds up today, and I think some of the scenes in which an actor interacts with Monkeybone look better than some modern films with actors interacting with CG. Monkeybone is a fully stop motion character animated in a really bombastic and cartoony way, yet he feels like he's in the scene. Stop motion for most of film history was basically synonymous with special effects, and with the advent of technology into special effects, what could have happened if a film like Monkeybone wasn't a disaster narratively and ended up being a huge success financially? Maybe we would have seen more stop motion characters in live action films. Okay, I think I've said my piece about Monkeybone. Let's talk about Coraline, a movie that lives in my head rent-free. I think Coraline had one of the biggest influences on me as an animator, and I would probably call it my favorite film of all time. Something's just very magical about the entire film, and it's sometimes hard to describe why, so let me try to. Okay, so every animator has that one work that makes them realize, oh yeah, people made this, right? When you're younger, animation is this magical thing that just kind of exists and shows up one day, but as you get older, you begin to realize that someone is responsible for every aspect of that project. Something about Coraline, I think, has probably the strongest feeling of that to me, where you can just sort of feel the handiwork of hundreds of artists involved. Someone knit Coraline's clothes, someone sculpted the replacement animation that's in the shower, someone animated the hair flowing down in the shot, someone realized this scene should be in forced perspective so that the dinner table was sloped down and facing the camera. Someone designed the back of the other mother's dress so that it resembles an insect shell, furthering her whole thing with insects. Someone designed the other father's set so that all of his belongings create these tall towers, which lead your eyes upwards and match his height. Someone popped all the popcorn for the trees in the forest. Someone modeled all the dogs in this audience. Someone 3D printed this chicken. You can even see the layer lines on it. And many people 3D modeled and 3D printed all of Coraline's faces. And a whole team of very patient people sanded down and painted every single face. This is the film I think of when I think of stop motion. And this is the film I think of when I remember just how much passionate, honest work goes into animation. Coraline is one of the greatest examples of hundreds of artists doing what they love and working at their best to make the best project possible, and I love every bit of it. Okay, so 2009. Let's talk about that 13-year gap between Coraline and Wendell and Wild, and the absolute tragedy of Selick's canceled film, The Shadow King. The story of this film's cancellation is incredibly long and complicated, and it could probably be a video in its own right. There's this great video that covers the entire history by Supervoid Cinema that you should watch instead, that I'll link down below. But I want to just use this film to paint you a picture about business. The short of it is that The Shadow King was going to be Selick's next film after Coraline, but Disney canceled it in 2012, and it was really deep into production when it got canceled. Disney spent $50 million on it, and it had a lot of near-final stop-motion animation done. It's extremely rare for a project to get canceled that late into production. So what happened? What we've learned so far from Selick's previous films is that when an artist is left to their own devices, they make art that they're passionate about, and audiences can tell that they were passionate about it. Corporations then end up with masterpieces that stand the test of time and are still talked about. On the business side, that can mean tons of marketing and merchandising for years to come, and it can be constantly replayed on TV networks and streaming services. It's a win-win at the end of the day for both artists and corporations. But when executives and corporate regime changes get in the way of artists, you get disasters. Powerful people who come in, demand a bunch of changes, and walk out with a project worse than when they came in. And all the while, that project probably would have been more financially successful if they had just left it alone. Because when an artist is passionate about what they're creating, it shows. And when it shows, audiences connect with it and recognize that passion. So if you recall, I mentioned that Disney was the one who canceled this film. Part of the reason it got canceled is because allegedly John Lasseter came in and made a bunch of changes to the film that they would then have to keep up with. That would balloon the budget and make the production of the film a lot harder on them. Ideally, Selick probably would have finished the film on time, and it probably would have been just as successful as Coraline. Selick puts it best in this interview with CTN.
When there's an executive more powerful than me forcing me to do something, in every case, it breaks the movie and can ultimately destroy it. My feeling is like, give me this much money, we agree on what this film's gonna be, and you're welcome to give me notes and have input, but let me decide and you'll have a better film that will be more successful. And when it goes the other way, it doesn't work.
People constantly complain about the current media landscape being entirely based on IPs from the 80s and 90s, because those IPs were created by artists without limits and stood the test of time as a result. And we currently see some of the strongest and most successful IPs come from independent productions because those artists are unrestricted and free to do as they please. At the end of the day, I get it. It's important to have deadlines and expectations and budgets, and when a project falls outside of all of those, it's reasonable to pull back expectations. That does happen. But too often, especially within 2022, we have seen an unbelievable amount of excellent projects that absolutely would have been more successful had they just been left alone. And sometimes it's better to give leeway and bite the bullet for the long-term cultural impact than the short-term gains. Netflix had this going for years, and they produced some of the best animated works in the past few years because of it, until they installed some executives from DreamWorks who canned anything that wasn't making Cocomelon numbers. What happened with The Shadow King also happened with Netflix's Bone adaptation. It happened with Boons and Curses, and it probably would have happened with Wendell and Wild had they not had a contract with Jordan Peele. So here's my pitch to you. Support these films. Show the world what happens when you just let artists do their thing, and maybe we can get more stuff like it. And Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio in December, while you're at it. Thanks for watching. The growth of this channel within the past couple weeks has been kind of insane, and I'm still kind of processing all of it. All I can say is just thank you. I'm just kind of obsessed with animation, and I love talking about it. I love teaching people about it, and I'm super excited to show you sort of the world of animation and show you things that you've never seen, teach you about things that you didn't understand, and I hope you get a lot out of it. I hope in between tutorials and learning, you don't mind me talking about things like this. I want to improve appreciation for animation as a whole, and I think part of that is not only showing how it's made and making it easy to understand, but showing the artists behind it and what they go through to create the stuff that people love and what companies profit off of. All the music in this video is done by my friend Jayfoo. He has his own YouTube channel, which you can find at jayfoo.com, and you should go subscribe to him and check out the rest of his music. He works super hard, and his music is a huge part of these videos. Like always, the usual YouTube stuff helps me out a lot, so I'd love to hear what you think about these films and stop motion in general. Despite being a 3D animator myself, stop motion is probably my favorite medium of animation, and I hope this video makes you appreciate it a little bit more. So thanks for watching my silly little videos about animation, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!